Is it really possible to get a professional quality paint job using regular Rustoleum from Home Depot? No. But let me tell you 3 reasons you might consider it anyway and how to get the absolute best results doing so. Painting a car with Rustoleum is definitely a contentious issue, and I'm fully prepared for the hate that I'm going to get in the comments section. Just to be clear, I'm talking about what I call bulk Rustoleum in a quart or gallon can from your local home improvement store, not rattle cans. This is my 1961 Lotus Super 7 replica that I painted back in 2016 with Rustoleum. 7 years and over 5,000 miles later, the paint still looks great. So how durable is it? Let's take a look at the rear fender of the Lotus. There's no front fenders on the car, so all the rocks and road debris gets kicked up and hits the rear fenders. It's kind of hard to see because the fenders are aluminum and they're painted silver, but they're covered in small rock chips. But the paint isn't peeling or coming off in big chunks, and I think that's a pretty acceptable amount of wear and what you would expect with any paint in this location. I've also smoked some cones on autocross, with this side of the car and with the fender. I've even had to straighten it out a couple times, and the paint has stayed intact. On the exhaust side, you can see a clear difference between the area shielded by the exhaust and the rest of the fender. So what's the trick to getting that kind of durability from Rustoleum? Hardener. Not just any hardener though, you need a hardener compatible with the paint. Rustoleum is an alkyd enamel, and automotive paint is typically a urethane. I'm not a chemist, so I'm not going to get in the weeds, but you need to use a compatible hardener with the paint. This hardener is found at farm stores with the tractor paint. Even though it's a different brand, it is chemically compatible with Rustoleum, and it has a number of benefits. Aside from making the paint harder, it improves long-term gloss retention, which can be a really big issue with Rustoleum paint jobs. Typically, they can start to fade and get chalky from a lot of UV exposure. I do keep the Lotus in a garage, but I drive it to work a lot, and it sits in the sun all day when I do. The other big benefit is chemical resistance. If you're painting something where there's going to be exposure to even the fumes from gasoline, like around the filler neck, let alone an actual spill, the hardener is the difference between still having paint and not. I've spilled gas all over this rear fender and trunk area, and you can't even tell. So let me show you how to mix and use it. The base mixture is 16 parts paint to 1 part hardener. I mix it by volume in a mixing cup because that's the easiest way to do it, or I use a syringe like you see here. Now let the paint sit for 10 minutes or so that it can activate. After 10 minutes, it's ready to use as is if you're painting with a brush, or it's ready to thin. Even if I'm hand painting with a brush, I still thin it just to get a smoother coat. After the 10-minute activation period, you need to use the paint pretty quickly because it will harden, even in a sealed container. The Rustoleum instructions say to thin no more than 10%, and that works for hand painting with a brush, but if you want to spray it through a Harbor Freight spray gun, which, let's face it, if you're watching this video and considering this, you're probably going to be using a Harbor Freight spray gun, I find that mixing 6 parts of activated paint and 4 parts of acetone works really well. I've mixed it as much as 50-50 and haven't really noticed any problems. If you want a slower cure, like if you're rolling it, using naphtha for a thinner will give you a slower cure than using acetone, so the paint has more time to self-level. And this is really just what's worked for me in the past. If someone out there has a better mixing ratio that works, post it in the comments below. I'm really curious to see what others are doing. And this video isn't sponsored by Rustoleum or anyone. This is just stuff I've figured out over the years, so if you can like and subscribe if you haven't already, that would help out the channel a lot. So let's talk a little bit about custom colors. And remember, this works with pretty much any alkyd enamel. If you want to do an OD green or a flat tan, I've used the hardener with the Hunter Specialties camo paint, and it turns out great. It'll make it slightly glossier, but it's very, very slight. And if you can't find a color you want, you can mix the various Rustoleum colors to get a custom color. The silver color you see here on my 7 is a dark machine gray mixed with some white to make it lighter, and the metal flake, it comes from the aluminum color that people use on propane tanks. So does adding the hardener make it as durable as a urethane automotive paint? No, it doesn't. So then why would you even use it? Well, reason number 1, it's cheap. A gallon of Rustoleum will cost you about $50, and the hardener another $20, and a gallon of acetone another $20. So for under $100, you get 2 full sprayable gallons of paint. The second reason, it's available. You can find gallons of Rustoleum at any Home Depot, and the hardener can be found at any farm store 7 days a week. Many auto parts stores don't even have a paint counter. Even if they do, they typically aren't open on the weekend for mixing paint. And reason number 3, it's very easy to work with. The mix ratio is 16:1, and it's not super critical if your ratio is off a little bit. It's also not sensitive to temperature and humidity. Automotive urethane requires different hardener and different reducer depending on the temperature you're spraying in. If you're spraying something outside or in a shop without climate control, you may need to have multiple hardeners and multiple reducers, which not only increases the cost, but makes it more challenging to mix and spray. So if you have a race car, a rock crawler, work truck, or any other cheap project and you're spraying in less than perfect conditions, Rustoleum could be a great choice. Anyway, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.